Yeah, I mean, I think it's starting to happen. Now, don't get me wrong, Joel, I've been at it for years now. And for years, I was doing it thinking, why am I doing this? When a franchisee comes to me and says, hey, I'm not getting leads in, I'm like, great. How many people did you meet? Oh, I spoke to 10 people in the last 90 days. Cool. What if you spoke to 10 people every day? And I think that the content helps that happen because I speak very passionately about activity. And look, if you just want the phone to ring and not do anything, we are not the brand for you. The first problem is how many? Do we have the volume right? Great, the volume is right, the engagement's wrong. Okay, great. So then keep the volume going and then let's change the copy and the content and then let's see what hits and find the next problem. But I think the first thing is, am I doing enough?
Welcome back to the Franchise Marketer Podcast. I'm joined by Amrit Dhaliwal, who's the founder and CEO of Wolfinch, which is a UK home care franchise, and he's doing great things with his brand. And I think where you lead the way, Emmett, from what I can tell from looking at everything, you're the perfect franchisor in terms of your personal branding and what you're doing. You got a newsletter, you do a book, you got a separate franchising website, you do a lot of podcasts, webinars, you do everything that the perfect franchisor, in my opinion, should do in the modern market from in a way to stand out. So first of all, Emmett, do you want to first of all share about your story, about how you got involved and did Wolfinch in the first place? And I'll ask you a few more questions about your personal brand.
Well, thank you, Joel. Actually, it's you sort of start doing all of this activity, thinking, how do you win in a noisy market? And really, for me, it was just, well, let's try this, let's try that, and you kind of piece this whole thing together, and then eventually that whole thing becomes a system. I got involved in franchising actually as a franchisee in 2012 in home care for a different brand. And I sort of felt that home care and franchising in the UK were broken. And I thought, well, this is what I need to really fix and do. And so I built that home care business up, sold it, and then went off to create my own home care brand called Wolfinch. And it's been really quite a fun me because I'm kind of constantly wearing two hats. I'm wearing the hat of a former franchisee and thinking, you know, how would I feel if someone was saying this to me? And then the hat of a franchisor thinking, gosh, I've really put a shift in here and we need this to kind of keep taking off. And so you've kind of constantly got both those things. But what that does is it creates ethical franchising, I think.
Yeah, I love the story. So you started as a franchisee in another system, then you went off and started your own franchise brand and obviously your own system with that as well, which is quite remarkable. I think a lot of franchisees do want to do that, but it's hard, very hard work to do it. So how long have you been doing Wolfinch for? And how many franchisees do you currently have?
So I sold my first franchise back in 2019 in December, literally just before the COVID lockdown, which was quite fun. And then we're at about 40 locations or so at the moment. And in the UK, we could probably get to about 200, 220 locations. So we tend to take on about 10 new locations every year, 10 new franchisees every year, give or take. I mean, that's kind of the pace at which we tend to grow.
Yeah, it's not that overly long to get to that sort of level with what you've done. So it's quite a great achievement. And I was going to say as well, home care franchising in the UK is pretty well established. But over here, I think it's sort of slowly getting a bit more of its start. We have a thing called the NDIS over here, and there's a lot of stuff popping up around that. So it's sort of going to start its wave soon with us. But do you want to talk about the home care franchise market in the UK and sort of how do you guys differ from other brands over there?
The UK market in home care is actually quite established, I'd say. So what you tend to find in the UK is that home care franchising has existed since the 90s.
Wow.
Now, that is both the opportunity and the problem. So the opportunity is that it's an established market. Franchisees predominantly understand that it exists, or kind of the product exists, not necessarily that the franchising piece exists, and people are used to receiving care. But I think that the problem actually is that so nothing has really changed in the last 20 years in home care franchising. I mean, heck, we just went through, as a sector, a big push to get people into to move from paper records to digital records, and so that's where we're at. And so for me, the differentiator was really kind of coming into it in a really interesting way. So coming at it from a really kind of tech standpoint and thinking, well, okay, what is our basic tech stack? So we started paperless. Zoom calls pre-COVID were kind of the norm, and actually I just thought, well, as a previous kind of former home care franchisee, what I realized was I don't necessarily want someone driving 5 hours to come and see me and then having my biscuits all day and not really delivering value, but sticking around because it took them so long. Sometimes I just need to answer the question. And so a 40-minute time slot is kind of what you need. And it's really tailoring that support. But fundamentally, the way we differ is kind of two things. The first thing is that we are the only home care brand that actively champions a really kind of active lifestyle, and for our prospects and our clients and everyone involved with us. So we really focus on longevity, that wellness piece. We focus on thinking about people within home care, thinking, well, are we talking about muscle mass increase for a 90-year-old? And if not, why not? Because actually you'll reduce falls. Then from a franchising perspective, we really focus on brand, because actually that's something that I've kind of obsessed a little bit over, thinking, well, how do I at Wolfinch, as kind of the new kid on the block, punch weight with people that are 15x our size, have 15x our budget, and also have been around 15x our time, right? And so, and for me, I thought, well, actually, the fight is different, and yes, you can't then compete with someone pound for pound on Google spend, but what can you do? And hence the kind of founder brand stuff.
Yeah, because you do a lot of it, and people can just check out Wolfinch, and you can see everything that Emmett does online. You've got your own podcast, the Walking CEO podcast. You've done a book, which I think is a great lead magnet. I think it's something that's everyone should do. You've got your separate franchising website now. You do a lot of Instagram. You do a lot of LinkedIn. You do all these types of things, and just for any franchisors listening, from a lead gen side point of view, you get stuff via that personal brand sort of marketing that you do, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's starting to happen. Now, don't get me wrong, Joel, I've been at it for years now. And for years, I was doing it thinking, why am I doing this? and so now, years later, now it's starting to kind of hit, because actually I think it does take that long.
Yeah.
We Kim Kardashian, right? It's not mass market. This is a really niche specific sector. I'm talking to the that pool of 200 people, really.
Yeah.
And actually that will take a long time to build trust, but also to kind of really understand what is it that they're after. So inevitably that then becomes one of your channels. Is it the channel? No, but does it support? So again, when you're looking at a new brand versus a brand that's existed for a long time, I think that the interesting piece for me is thinking, well, we now have our own trust story that's different to the guys that have been around 20 years, and they are wonderful. I'm very, very good friends with a lot of the home care franchise market in the UK, and actually there's some wonderful brands that I would, if I was going back in time, I'd buy a franchise from, and I think do a great job. But that doesn't mean that there's no space for Wolfinch and Amrit in that market, and it's then sort of muscling your way in and figuring out how am I different, what's my niche, and what can I deliver that someone else can't. One of the things I think about a lot is, when I speak to franchisees about this, talk to your competitors and understand what they are excellent at, and then don't copy that. Figure out what they are terrible at and get really good at that. So if your competitor is at picking up the phone, get good at picking up the phone. If your competitor is not good at X, get really good at that thing. What I think that a lot of businesses do is they don't do this kind of reverse benchmarking. And what I mean by that is I used to be a restaurateur. And so if there was a guy around down the corner, and his restaurant was full every night of the week, and I was tremendously jealous of this, and his revenue was probably 4x mine. I thought, oh my god. And I was back early 20s at the time. I was like, well, I'll just do that. What he did was he did this kind of tasting menu every night, and it was excellent. Actually, I went there and I thought, god, this is damn good. And I thought, well, I could do this. And before I launched that, I thought, well, no, actually I can't do that, because everyone is going to compare what I'm doing to his, and even I think his is better. So don't copy the competitor, but just do the thing that they're not good at. get really good at figuring out, well, what does that restaurant not deliver? And can I deliver that thing? So what he didn't do was that personal service, really. And I thought, well, actually, I can be that local go-to. And what that meant at the time in my 20s was that I was, there every night at the restaurant, but I knew every single customer's name, their story, their kids, oh, you've done the marathon and so on. And I really kind of got under that. And yes, the food was great and the wine was great, and it was actually really reasonably priced for what it was. But the service piece was really what I doubled down on. And I thought, well, okay, I can build a business out of this because we are about repeat business in that particular sector. The same sort of thing in home care. What can I get really good at? Thinking, well, actually, my competitors might lose lots of carers. So how do I get really good at keeping them? Right? Do I obsess over that? Or they might be, not so good at responding to leads when they come in. How do I get amazing at that? How do I train my franchisees to be amazing at that? So whatever that thing is, I think double down on that.
Yeah, and I think with you mentioned something a lot. I like what you said, the trust story with what you've done. And I think building a franchise or personal brand, it's not an overnight thing. And I think people stop because they think with after 2 months of posting, you should get all this sort of stuff. And then when you have nothing happen, you give up. But you've been doing it for years now. And as you said, you're slowly starting to see some effects of that, because as your brand gets bigger as well, people are then learning about you via that, or vice versa as well. And they're sort of working together now. And you've got this other marketing channel, which maybe other established competitors don't have, that you've done, which is the personal element, as opposed to just a faceless, I guess, corporation, which other brands don't, if they don't have this founder sort of element. Is that what you're sort of seeing now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in my experience, it's taken 3 years for it to kind of start to mean something. And actually, also, the volume is actually quite astounding. I've got to say, if I do say so myself, there are hundreds of pieces of content that go out every month, hundreds. And I think actually, it's really understanding that. But also, I just, I got to say that works for me. I enjoy it. Actually, I like it, and I think it works because I enjoy it. And so,
Yes.
do you see what I mean? I think if you do, I see people doing that or trying to do that, and it's a bit crap actually, and it's because they don't want to do it, and they're doing it because some guy in marketing like Joel told them you got to do this. But actually, I think you've got to want to do this stuff, right? And if you don't want to do it, and again, it comes back down to the thing that I was saying earlier. Well, what is the thing that you do want to do? And get really good at that. But I think from my perspective, as a 3 years ago, we had no existence really, and I think that the personal brand piece has absolutely supported that, and it's created opportunity. So outside of selling or franchises, it's created other opportunities. You and I have met through that. Frankly, I've been able to speak to people around the world in the space of franchising that I absolutely would not have the opportunity to speak to if it wasn't for that. I've been invited to interviews or speaking events and so on that I wouldn't be invited to if it wasn't for that. And yes, the prospect journey, I believe will start actually, and we may be at the beginning of that, and maybe that'll take another 3 years. But I think for me, I'm all about the press ups, and I constantly talk about this. I'm all about the activity. If you just do enough of it, and if you're not seeing result, well, double it and triple it, and actually, okay, maybe I need to be sending out 1,000 pieces of content every month to try and understand it. But for me, it's all about volume to then understand. When a franchisee comes to me and says, "Hey, I'm not getting leads in," I'm like, "Great. How many people did you meet?" "Oh, I spoke to 10 people in the last 90 days. Cool. What if you spoke to 10 people every day? And so I'm all about volume of activity, and building your kind of key personal influence in that area, whether you're a franchisee or a franchisor.
And well, how would you then say if a franchisor says, "All right, I don't want to do this sort of stuff, but I know I've got to do it," where would you advise them to start? Because I think you've got a lot of like the walking CEO. It's a good environment. You're out there with a coffee, walking in a format which I think's more natural than sitting in a podcast studio across from someone, right? Which people might think they have to do. So, what would you sort of say to a franchisor or someone going, "Right, I know I need to do something as a personal brand, but I might be too shy, or I don't want to be on video, whatever it is"? What would you sort of advise them?
my advice would be just start with one platform and just focus on one platform. Get really good at doing that one platform. So whether that is LinkedIn or whether that is Instagram or whatever it is, and just get used to doing something. Start posting 2 or 3 times a week and figure out, well, okay, can I schedule it, or how can I kind of do this? And actually, I've got to say, I put all of my own stuff out, right? And I kind of think about my own stuff. And I have tested having other people do it, but I just never feel like it feels authentic. And I go back in time to when I started posting. It wasn't natural to me. I don't naturally come from that background. I actually thought, well, this is actually quite embarrassing. People are taking me seriously and so on. And if I go back to my old my photo reel, there are so many videos of me in a car park saying, "Hi, my name is." Right, let's start again. Hi, no, right again. Oh, I'm Amrit Dhaliwal, and actually now I just first chuck it out because it's real, and I feel the embarrassment level has disappeared, to a certain degree anyway. So my advice would be start with one platform, get good at it, add the next one, and as your confidence builds, just start adding new bows. And okay, maybe the podcast bit, I really enjoy it as well. I got to say, I really enjoy it, but it's also extremely time consuming getting out there, having a backward walking videographer, and so interviewing people and organizing diaries and so on. But maybe just knocking out something on your own in the office, that might be a starting point, and then build up to that. So I think we all think about this phenomenally produced Alex Hormozy style kind of content machine, but it's got to start from somewhere, right? And so if we think big, but actually get practical and say, let me start with one thing. I'm gonna start with one post a week. I got guys in my team. I'm like, hey, can you put one post out a week? And they're like, yeah, I could do one a week. Great. Now can you do 2 a week? And let's build it up to 7 a week. And then let's build it up to 2 platforms and so on. And same thing for me. I've just added a Substack. We're sort of working on TikTok, and I just kind of keep adding to that. And I don't necessarily know why yet, if I'm really honest, but I kind of just think, well, I'm going to do this stuff because my audience is looking at me at different places, and I'm giving them different parts of my personality on different platforms.
I think you're building a layer of trust online in multiple spots, and you're strengthening your AI or your search presence as well with AI. If someone does a bit of research and says, who is this guy, right? For example, you've got all this different footprint online in multiple places, which they can then learn about you, where a lot of franchisors are ghosts, pretty much. They don't have anything on them, and they might have a LinkedIn profile, and that's it. Whereas you've got all this presence with digital PR, YouTube channel, podcast. It just gives you way more authority. And if someone's looking at between you and another franchisor or franchise brand, I reckon that would definitely sway the decision in your favor. Whether they tell you or not's another story, but I think psychologically it does give for a bit more level of trust. And what do you find has been for you the most? You mentioned the podcast. Is it the most enjoyable thing that you do? The Walking with Wolfinch CEO podcast?
I because I got to say, I actually don't like posting on socials. Right? It's quite like it's a lot of admin.
It is.
What the bit I enjoy about the socials is the interaction that happens after the post goes out. The thinking there on a Sunday evening about, oh well, what would make I'm going through my photos. No, this might be interesting and so on. That bit I find is really kind of your brain racking, and it's quite kind of hard. And then there's admin, and I hate admin, and that's the only admin that I actually do personally. I got to say, so if you email me, I ain't reading that thing, right? So,
when you're the boss, that's the way you got to be. That's why they've earned it. You've earned that right.
So. But the podcast is great because actually all I got to do is turn up, right? And then Dan, my videographer, comes and he knows the patter. All I'm doing is talking to an amazing guest, a friend usually from the sector, and we dig in and we'll have a coffee, we'll have a walk, and it'll be great fun for me. And I just got to turn up to that because now, after doing it for a while, the guys know, right, this is what we're doing. We're doing these videos, these clips, these pictures, great. And then it goes out and they do all of the stuff. But actually for me, that is quite fun because I learn some really interesting
Yeah.
things along the way. I think that the learning aspect for me, I love. I'm constantly trying to learn the next thing. And every single episode, and I have competitors on the episode pod as well, actually, often, and every single episode, there'll be something I pick up that I think, gosh, yeah, you know, it could be someone totally different, someone from the creative world or digital industry or franchising, and I'm like, hey, yeah, how does that relate to what we're up to, and can we test something, and off we go.
And I don't really love you do as well. You interview your franchisees. Like
Yes.
there's not many people like I do it for Jim. I've been in for six. Like I'm at work for Jim and I do with Al. I've been on for 7 years, but not many people actually interview their franchisees or have the relationship with their franchisee that will come on and do an interview. And you've got heaps of them, which I think is a massive point of difference.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it is actually. I've
Mm.
not thought about it that way, and I sort of I'm really interested in that because actually, building a relationship with your franchisee is paramount. I'm a big believer that franchising is all hearts and minds. The franchise agreement, whatever, it's all it's in a drawer somewhere collecting dust because as soon as you pull that out, the relationship's dead, right?
Yep.
And so if there's an issue, I want to kind of be able to pick up the phone or look at the whites of your eyes and have a conversation about it. And so what that requires is a lot of ongoing relationship building. And so one of the things I try to make a point of is turning up to as many events that we do as a network, meeting franchisees one on one, and then being able to then say, hey, Joel, can you come on? You're Wolfinch, Australia. Could you come on? And often they love that. I think,
Yeah.
and because being part of Wolfinch, all my franchisees know, hey, if you're coming into an event, there's going to be a selfie, there's going to be video,
Yeah.
right? It's probably going to be online or whatever. I better press my shirt, and so on. So it's kind of part of our culture now, which I
Mm.
think is quite interesting, and that is often not part of other cultures. They're usually the photographer is there for the press release, but I'm like, take all of the different eventualities of pictures because we might need this for something else later. And that's always quite interesting. Soon as people come in for franchisee training, and it's like they're like, what the hell is going on here? And it becomes like the engine room for it.
And actually, if you're a prospect looking at you and other competitors, like, what says better from just learning about the franchise without even inquiring, like that the CEO is actually interviewing franchisees who talk about their success and their revenue and stuff, and the other system's got nothing or hides everything behind a website inquiry form. Like, I know which one I would go for as a prospect. Has that been said to you by prospects at all? They consume that sort of stuff before they come into you, or how does that work with your journey?
Yeah, now again, 3 years later, now what I'm finding is serious prospects are really kind of doing the research, and so I'm saying no a lot. We're speaking to a lot of people every month, but I'm saying no a lot, and really what we're looking for is the right kind of people to join us. But what we're finding is that the really good quality people have done you know loads of consumption of information,
Mm.
and they have a kind of understanding of the brand, of me, the whole thing, and they kind of know whether they
Yeah.
want to be part of that or not. And that hasn't always been the case. Again, it's taken a few years, but now I'm finding that people are really kind of getting to know me before they come
Yep.
into the room,
Yeah.
which is great.
I think it's testament to your hard work, because that's what we do in gyms. It's the same thing. We've done so many podcasts over the years, and you'll be surprised. Someone might go to me in training. I feel like I know you've watched 200 of your podcasts, which would be like bloody 200 hours of stuff. They need
Yeah,
something
yeah.
else to do. But I think that'd be the same with what you'd be finding, right? They've probably watched 30 hours of you speaking to all these people before they've even inquired. And then when they go through your process, you've already got someone who's aligned with your values and knows who you are. And I think it's just makes for a better franchisee in the end.
Yeah, I think so. And also, I think where a lot of people get scared is that they get worried that it won't align with enough people. And really what I've done over the last 18 months is double down on who is it that I want. Who do I want to be part of this team? And really what that means is I'm helping people get to a no faster. And that's okay. It's okay that someone thinks that the next door neighbor's home care brand is right for them. In fact, I had a meeting with someone, and well, I mean, we didn't have the territory they were after anyway, but I just instinctively felt they were aligned to one of our competitors, just from a cultural standpoint.
Mm.
And I actually suggested to them in this meeting, I was like, look, I think this would be a better place for you to sit. And they were shocked. My competitor was shocked that I'd sort of said this. I was like, look, they're great actually, but I just don't think they're great for us. I don't think that the relationship in 5 years' time would work because of X, Y, and Z. And that's totally okay. For me, half of the job is getting people to a no fast. And I think that the content helps that happen, because I speak very passionately about activity. And look, if you just want the phone to ring and not do anything, we are not the brand for you.
Yeah.
I am about doing the press ups, right? I've literally this morning up at 6, hit the gym, got the kids out, bam, here with Joel, right? And I'm all about the activity. I don't think, for me, nothing has ever come quickly and easily. And I'm like, put a shift in and it will happen. My daughter said to me recently, oh, such and such in the class is always beating me on the spelling test. And she's like 6 years old. And I was like, well, does he do loads of work for it? She said, no, it just comes naturally to him. And I was like, great. That's amazing. I was like, so if you did like 10 hours of practice on this spelling test, you'd beat him. And she's looking at me like, I was like, yeah, well, if he's not doing the work and he's just winging it every time, and you do like 10x the work. And she's like, okay. And guess what? She got a 10 out of 10 on the spelling test. Then she just carried on doing that. And now, every week she's kind of there, just like, oh, I'm going to do this 15 times and gets it right. And it's about doing the work and just working harder than the next door neighbor.
Yeah, and it's a great point, Amrit. You said you do the reps, and I think that's the key. Like the same with like gyms, the same thing. We've done the reps for many years, and you're right, after 2 to 3 years of that big trust layer being built, you notice a lot of things happening, but it's all those reps prior. And I think what you said with what you do, the practicing in front of the camera constantly, making mistakes, and you're going to get a lot better. And you probably look back at your stuff from 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and you go, geez, it was embarrassing. But you've got to go through that phase to get to where you are, and everyone has to pay that due of doing that sort of stuff. You can't shortcut the process. And it's an interesting one with Hormozy. I like to go to his YouTube channel and go to his oldest videos, and he's still got his first videos up from back in the day. Even though he's naturally a really good speaker, you can just see that, like, you had the 10-minute video sitting in front of a camera like this, just talking about his gym business from 10, back in the day. You can see where it's evolved now. But the thing is, everyone's just got to start somewhere. And I think a lot of franchisors don't even attempt to do it because it's got to be perfect, or they need to have the right script, or they delete 10 episodes, whatever it is. And they just got to just do it, keep moving forward. And that's exactly what you've done in your business.
Yeah, and I think that's a lovely point, Joel, that you have to get past that embarrassment. And often the embarrassment is between, the 6 inches between your ears, right? And it's, because no one else really cares that much, I think.
That's the key phrase, what you just said. What you just said, I want to stop on that. No one else really cares. Everyone's in their own lives, and they're scrolling to this onto the next thing like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and they're literally going to flick past it. If it's you'll get 12 seconds, right? And that's it. So don't worry about it, basically.
Absolutely. Now, with running a business like you do, like scaling, so obviously scaling comes with some issues. What's sort of been the challenges you've overcome with scaling it from your first franchisee to where you are now? What are some of the biggest hurdles you've overcome?
Some of the biggest challenges come down to simple things. Number one, it is having the right people around you. And I've been on a whole kind of journey over time to get a professional team around me, because I think otherwise, as a CEO and a founder, you get stuck in a golden cage of saying, well, okay, I have to work all the time. Where actually a lot of my work is this. I'm not doing the day-to-day kind of grind of the business. I'm involved in strategy. I'm involved in PR. But I'm not involved in, Joel's gross profit is up and down. Yes, I'll look at that once a quarter and say, what are we doing about that? But I won't be working with you on a daily basis on that. So I think I've been able to exit myself from that because I've got the right people. It did not start there, and it was extremely painful. I think that the second thing that I would say that has been quite sort of hard has been, thinking about scale and creating a system that works at 200. So I had a meeting with one of my team members on Monday this week, and the conversation was like, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And I said, okay, can you do it at 200? And she's looking at me saying, yeah, probably not, right? I was like, great, so don't do it. So now tell me how we can do it at 200, and let's start doing that today. And so the thinking has had to really change. We think like a business doing 200 million in revenue. We try not to think like a business doing 25 million in revenue.
Right.
And I think that's the hard thing, because what you're doing is you're working for yourself in 4 years' time. You're not working for the self today. And
Right.
I think that, I believe that to be true of any business, actually. If I think about my home care businesses, I'm like, well, have we got the team set up for the sales and the marketing and the recruitment and the yada, yada, yada? And if not, well, we don't need it. I can do everything today, Amrit. Like, great, but could you do it at 2 million? No, great. So don't do it now. Put the system in. Let's roll it. And then guess what? You'll get to 2 million faster, right?
Absolutely. And how did you then? Because people struggle to do what you've done, which is basically take yourself out of. You're doing all these things as a founder and pull themselves out of it and objectively really look at it and get help and sort of delegate. Like that seems to be a big for high achievers like yourself. That's a really hard challenge for delegation. So, how did you go about that originally? And like, how did you look at it? Like, did you just look at the position, broke it down, SOP'd it, then hired for it, make sure they were a good fit, and obviously because that takes a lot of time as well. But then once you found that fit, you could move on to the next thing. Or how'd you actually do it?
I mean, slowly and painfully. So slowly, because it's taken me 10 years to become a good delegator. I'd say now I'm a pretty decent delegator.
Yeah.
And I say 10 years because I had my nose and fingers in everything for ages. I was there working till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, building the thing and delivering the thing. And then, where I've got someone else saying, well, I thought I was doing that. No, I've done it. And so I went through that whole thing. And then so I very slowly thought, okay, well, what if I just gave X person this bit, and then, well, okay, now they can do that, and what about that bit? And then I created system and training around that and so on. But then, so that was a slowly bit. The painfully bit was I needed to be in more pain, and I thought, well, my pain came from, I'm doing all of this stuff, right? So I have a full-time PA that works for me, and her, literally a 40 hours a week, and she'll read every single email that comes in, draft it, curate it, she'll work with my meetings, and right, she set this call up for us, and all of that kind of stuff. And so what I've realized is I need to be involved only in the action, right? So I want to be able to turn up to the room. The sandwich that I needed was there, and the protein bar that I have is there, and the right coffee is there, and we're just, the numbers are on the screen, and we're getting right into the conversation with a fixed agenda meeting. And that has literally taken me like 10 years to figure
Wow.
out. And so, but really systemizing the heck out of my life has meant that I'm thinking, well, okay, how do I squeeze the pips out of this? And so if I think about this year, 2026, 1st of January 2026, I already had, I think, 400 or 500 meetings booked in the diary for the year. The repeating stuff, everything was there, saying, right, on a Monday I do this, on a Tuesday I do that. My PT sessions are in there. Everything is there, right? And I'm like, great. So now I know my core things. I know that the speaking events that I tend to speak at are in there. All of that stuff. I've got the fixed days that I'm going to be doing podcasting and so on is already there, and so now we just need to slot things in. Friend dev meetings that don't exist yet are already booked in, and so on. And so, if you can then systemize that, and then you think, well, okay, well, can I do the admin around that? Well, no, I can't. And if I'm doing the admin around that, what am I taking out? And then you're saying, well, who do I need to hire? And oh, right, if I'm doing this and I'm not doing the admin, great. But then can I get operationally involved in that thing over there? Well, no, I can't. So who needs to do that? And I think it's then just really committing to the scale, right? If you're committing to the scale, I think most business owners get happy with where they are, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But it's an observation. They're happy where they are. They're happy with what is coming in and what's happening, and they're like, well, I don't want to go through that evolution of change and the pain that goes with that. And I think you've got to commit to the pain. and say, right, okay, I don't like this person isn't right for it. You've got to then really think about your team. We go through a kind of get it, want it, has capacity with people in our team. Senior leadership will sit down and say, right, we've got Johnny over here. Does Johnny get it? Does he want it? Does he have capacity to do it? If any one of those things is a no, guess what, Johnny, sorry, mate, you're not right for it. We've got to then keep going. And it's just getting the right people to do the right things, put the system in, and then understand that if you want to scale, you need to be focused on the right things, and not in admin.
Okay, so it's great advice. Great advice. But I was going to ask you about, so with scaling to 200, and you've got a massive, crazy schedule from hearing. I mean, that's quite a lot, very organized. How do you decide what's the highest leverage thing you can do to move your business forward? Or have you made that decision? So you mentioned a bit about PR and things like that. So how have you come to that conclusion, or how have you decided on, like, these are the highest leverage things I can do that will actually get me forward? Because it sounds like great advice, like stuff that's not moving you forward, you're going to systemize and you're not even going to get involved with and make sure it gets done. But then you've got to decide about all these other things. So how have you come to how do you decide on this, and what's your sort of your vision to get everything forward to 200?
So you've got two or three things, right? The first place that your revenue will grow maybe is a primary business. Maybe I've got a home care business. The second place is sale of franchises, and that is not really making money out of the franchise fee. That's creating royalty trees.
Right.
The third place is then the actual MSF that comes in. And so great, thinking about, that is the place, right? So they're the three places that you go, that deliver EBITDA to your business. So let's focus on those three things and what is going to move those three things. For me, I'm thinking, well, those three things, the running of my own business, I'm not involved in. Someone else is involved in that. And I have, 90 minutes a quarter or whatever it is that I'm saying, are we moving? Are we not? And if we're not, what is the systems? Great. And it's really a pilot branch. Great. So I've then got two places that I need to focus: the sale of franchises and building franchisees. And so they're the two things that we as a business need to obsess over. And then it's thinking, do I have a weekly scorecard that thinks about those two things? So, and that isn't necessarily saying, hey, I want the MSF number to go from this to that, but that is saying, well, what are the press ups that need to happen for that? So, is that a number of handshakes as a business? Is that a number of visitors to the website? Okay, great. Is that a number of podcasts delivered, and so on? And so really it's understanding where is the revenue coming from, and then what drives it. And for me, it's spending the time obsessively in the place that drives the revenue. So it's then, because you kind of got leading and lagging indicators, right? And you've got to spend the time, in my opinion, on the thing that is going to drive it, right? So if driving franchise sales is making more phone calls, well, okay, how many phone calls are we making? Am I tracking it? If driving more care leads is having more handshakes, are we tracking it? And I think it's teaching those things, spending your time in that, and then tracking it every single week. And so we have a weekly scorecard that really focuses on those things. And so, when for me, everything is measurable. I literally, I don't care whether it's PR work or whether it's compliance work. It's all measurable, right? Because actually there's got to be a number. So if it's blogs, how many blogs a week? So okay, maybe the blog is not, no one's reading it. Great. That's the next problem. The first problem is how many, and do we have the volume right? Great. The volume is right. The engagement's wrong. Okay, great. So then keep the volume going, and then let's change the copy and the content, and then let's see what hits and find the next problem. But I think the first thing is, am I doing enough? Because most of the time, the issue isn't the system. The issue is the lack of volume.
Right. Love that line, lack of volume. And I think that's a really great point. And you definitely don't lack the volume with what you do. You do a hell of a lot of stuff, and I think it's a great example. Like if I had 10 of you in my gyms franchisors, like 10 of what you do from a volume perspective, because we do it at a head office perspective, right, with Jim. But if I had 10 of you in our division, we'd probably be at 10,000, because what you do is like the model for, I think, the modern franchisor in terms of personal branding. You've obviously got your Wolfinch brand and your company brand, which you do well, and your franchisees are doing that at a local level. But as I said, as a founder, I think your channel and your story is the trust layer that's going to get people to trust you more to become a franchisee with you, something you've just put all this hard work in. That's the modern day method for the future of franchising, I would say.
I mean, I hope so, Joel.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I've just spent the last 3-4 years doing the wrong thing, right?
Well, when
But
prospects talk to you now, but that's the key, right? You've had people
yeah,
who watch a lot of things now, right? They say, I've watched this over, or
yes,
they've watched 20 things,
yes,
right? And I think that's your indicator that what you're doing is working. It's just a matter of, as you said, doing more reps to reach more people. That's probably the
yeah,
key.
yeah.
Yeah. Now, you went to the IFA in the US. What were some of your learnings from that? Because I do think we do in the UK and Australia. I do think we do a couple of things better than them. I think one of them is they obviously have brokers over there, which do
Yeah.
their franchising and consultants, whereas over here we do our own lead gen and we do our own sales, and that requires us to do content on the front end, which I don't think a lot of them do it over there. You have brokers who do their content and don't want anything to, and the brand doesn't really want much to do with it. So a bit different in that regard. But what did you learn from over there? Obviously, you did a lot of interviews with some big people over there. What were your main takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I always come back from America, and so I've been going out for about 4 years to the IFA. I did the merging conference as well. I think there's a couple of things. Number one, I think they're really good at slicing and dicing their data. And they really kind of understand, well, hey, when I do this, that happens. And when the phone rings this many times, then that happens on revenue and so on. So they really kind of get granular with the data. So this is even pre-AI, right? Obviously now that's kind of been easier, but I remember 4 years, maybe even 5 years ago, going out to the international, the emerging convention in Nashville, and I remember a home care franchisor who, they again sensible scale, 300-400 locations out there, was talking about the slicing and dicing of their data with like Tableau and whatever, and I was thinking, bloody hell, we're like, I've literally never heard anyone talk about this ever in my life before, and I thought, gosh, wow. And so I thought that was really, the way they think about data is really interesting, and what they then do with it. And I think instinctively they kind of make decisions based on data, which great, that's sensible. The other thing I think that is really is really interesting is that kind of that Greg Nathan type thinking that they've got of, I'm going to focus on franchisee profitability. So, and this is one of the things that I really obsess over. We sit down on a monthly, quarterly basis, get into every single franchisee's P&L, which actually came from America, and really, and Greg Nathan, actually, he was my second interview. My first interview on the pod was my parents, and my second was Greg Nathan.
I know
And
Greg pretty well. Yeah.
I mean, he's just
Yeah.
a total legend, isn't he? And
Yeah,
and
he's
and
nuts.
my the last question on my podcast with him and with most people is like, what is the one thing that people can do to kind of shift the needle, essentially? And he said to all franchisors, focus on franchisee profitability, and that was enough for me, and I thought, okay. And so we focus on franchisee profitability and really kind of double down on thinking about what drives profitability. What are we doing? Because actually sometimes what drives a franchisee's profitability and what drives a franchisor's profitability are two different things, right? We might, as a franchisor, you might say, hey, do it cheap, pilot high, contract work, whatever. But as a franchisee, that adds risk, that doesn't really add enough EBITDA and so on. And so our thinking is constantly about what is driving franchisee profitability. So I think that really, that thinking, and they obsess over that, and I think that's so interesting. So that relationship piece with franchisees is really interesting. But also, one of the things that I see a lot out there is how they systemize the relationship. So they've got advisory councils from an early age, and they really kind of systemize that relationship. And we've really thought about that part of it. And so one of the things I've done is kind of split our network into cohorts, revenue cohorts, and kind of given them different support at different revenue stages,
Right.
to say, well, you need to focus on sales, you need to focus on leadership and management and so on. And then obviously AI, and thinking about where that's going and what's happening over there. And I think there's clearly everyone's very excited by that. But I think actually the one big takeaway I had from someone out there was, well, why are you doing it, right? Are you doing it because it's sexy and it's a buzzword, or are you doing it because it delivers EBITDA?
Mm.
Because if you're not doing it because it delivers EBITDA, then don't do it, basically, right? I thought, fair enough,
Yeah.
it's like
Well, it's true. A lot
if
of
it's not
companies will
gonna,
waste a lot of money on AI adoption with stuff that they've got no idea they're paying for, and then
yeah,
it's gonna,
but
yeah.
yeah,
But I think
is it? Good, sorry, good.
no, but I was going to say the one thing I think you do ahead of the Americans, and I think we do over here with what we do in gyms anyway, the franchisor recruitment piece with content and that
Yeah,
trust layer because obviously franchising's got a level of skepticism to it from people who don't understand it, and there's a higher sort of trust factor you've got to get over. And I think Americans are probably a little bit more business minded than maybe us in Australia, I guess. Anyway, they'd be more entrepreneurial, where they're not then maybe a bit more trusting of the franchise system or the business. Whereas in the UK and Australia, I think there's a little bit more of a skepticism
yeah.
towards franchising, and I think we have to offset that by doing content out there about our systems and our recruitment, which you obviously do extremely well. And I don't think there's many brands in America that have got that yet because they have that broker model, which I do.
Yeah.
But I have heard of some brands in America actually trying to do what we're doing now, what you're doing, and what I'm
Nice.
doing over here. They've just started trying to do it. So I think they're ahead of a lot of the game in the game. But I think what we do here, what we're doing now, is a little bit ahead of what the curve with one thing back probably towards the Americans in their system.
Which is great, right? I mean, I think, and I think that is the great thing about the international community, because there's so many things that can slosh about. And you're in Australia, I'm in the UK, I've got friends in the US, and actually, what is wonderful is being able to pick up the phone to you, or pick up the phone to Johnny Franchise out in the States or something, and say, hey, look, I'm, when I was setting up my franchise advisory council,
Yes.
I phoned Johnny, and Johnny is one of the leading people in this space of, like, I think he helped like Ben and Jerry set their advisory council up, and so on. And I was like, Johnny, can I just hop on a call? I just want to sense check something. And he was like, yeah, and that is priceless, right? And I just think being able to tap into that, or if I've got, I'm like, hey, Joel, I'm just doing this thing with the pods on, what do you think, right?
Mm.
Being able to speak to some of the world's best around the world, saying, if you're talking about personal brand and franchise marketing, well, who better to speak to than yourself, Joel,
Mm.
frankly, and it's being able to pick up the phone to people, I think, is extremely powerful. And I think that's one of the things from a personal brand point of view. I think, if you picked up the phone to most people in franchising, well, they would answer your call. And
Yeah.
and that has not happened by accident. That has happened by you really doing the work. And for me, I think that is the powerful thing.
Yeah, I think what you've done though, you've just done the reps to earn that as well. Like you've just created this name around yourself with what you've done. You go out of your way. You've been so proactive in interviewing. You've probably done the most podcast interviews I'd say at the IFA with the volume you did there. They probably saw you walking around everywhere with all these people there, right? But like
Yeah.
that's the hard work that's required so that you can pick up the phone to that gentleman about the advisory committee, for example. You earn that sort of trust and you earn that reputation by doing the in-person stuff. And I think even though we talk about the online stuff as well, you're really proactive with your learning, going overseas, and like you're going to events and like you're really putting yourself out there. And I don't think a lot of franchisors do it. They might go pay a marketing agency or whatever and go generate me high quality prospects, and they go to the agency, oh, you're not getting me any high quality prospects. But then you look at what the franchisor's got online. No, they don't have a website. They don't have a YouTube interview about themselves. They've got nothing on social. They do nothing. Yet expect people to trust and invest with their system based on just a franchise opportunity that's posted online. I think what you've done over 3 years now, you've got this massive trust layer and this reputation that you're building. It's only going to grow. So how are you going to, like, how do you look at your personal brand over the next 2 to 3 years? Is it just more for you, keep increasing the reps with what you do on the volume? Are you going to try put your time into more different formats? Or how are you going to look at growing your own franchise or personal brand and over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting, right? Your point about the IFA, I mean, yeah, that was like over 2 or 3 days. I think it was 80,000 steps and
Yeah.
bleeding, quite literally, right? And you've got to really want to do it. And I think doing that yourself, I think, is a whole different thing than getting a marketing person to do it, frankly, right? Or an agency to do it, and so on. And I think that for me is I feel that is the kind of differentiation, the founder involving themselves in it as opposed to subbing it out. I think, for me, I think it's not about having the marketing, it's about who's doing it as well, I think. And I may be wrong on that, but I really feel like that adds something. For me, I think the personal brand piece is really doubling down on the things that are going well and really understanding what is it, what is the now that we've got a good foundation. It's kind of looking ahead and saying, how do I want this to look in 10 years time, mapping that out and then working backwards, and also saying, well, what do I want the personal brand to do? So things that I've kind of got in play at the moment is sort of separating the Amrit brand to the Wolfinch brand and my own website and so on. So we're looking at that over the next 3-6 months. I've got a new book that I've started writing, which is really talking about talking to employees and saying, should you jump and become a franchisee and a business owner, or should you not?
Right.
So, and then and really also just really thinking about the content stream. So rather than just knocking it all out, thinking, well, okay, what is it? What who am I talking to, and is this what they want to hear? And creating things for that audience essentially. So I'm excited about what the future is holding, and also I think great. It's something that's different. It's fun, and part of my aspiration is to make home care sexier, right? And hopefully, this could be part of that. As a business, we could make it a much more interesting place to spend time.
And is your videographer full time in your business, or is it just videographer you just hire for the podcast, or how does that work?
I used to hire someone, and I just found having someone full time is quite useful, and so he'll do various different things with me, and now, but he's basically full time now.
That's great, because that's what I did back in 2019 myself, and I was the best ROI hire we ever did, and I think that's great to hear that you're doing that as well, because I think it's an absolute. I remember Gary Vaynerchuk, when he was book crushing, said if he was going to start a company, it'd be 4 positions he hires for. One was a finance, and the other one was a videographer or content creator. This is back in 2018 or 2017. I took that advice literally, and you have as well. And I think from what we both do, it's a great return on investment, because I think people look at video as a cost as opposed to a long-term investment. I view every video as a long-term investment, and you probably would as well, because those interviews you do from 2-3 years ago are probably going to get consumed by people just thinking about doing what you're doing now, and that's going to build that trust to them, hopefully come across the board and be a franchisee with what you do.
True, yeah. I mean, they just live forever, basically, right? So,
absolutely.
So yeah, I think that's quite helpful. But thank you very much, Joel. It's been a real pleasure.
I've taken an hour of your time, Amrit. I know you're a busy man, so if people want to learn more, just literally punch in Wolfinch Franchising. Check out Amrit on LinkedIn. I'll put a whole bunch of links and stuff in there as well, and grab a copy of his book, which he's got online. But if you want to look at a franchisor doing personal branding right, guys, obviously I'm in Australia, but I think UK. What Amrit's doing is right up there. I don't think there's many better doing it than yourself, Amrit, and it's a lot of hard work, and you've done a great job with it, and I'm looking forward to seeing you get to 200, because I think you will. It's just a matter of the stories and all the challenges along the way, I guess, but I think you're going to definitely do it from your hard work. So well done with what you've done so far and your success.
Thank you, Joel. It means a lot coming from you, and I've really enjoyed the conversation.
No worries. Thanks, mate.